Evening, everyone. First of all, on behalf of Department of Assamese, Tezpur University, I welcome you all to this program. I am extremely happy that today Professor Arjun Ghosh from Indian Institute of Technology, New Delhi, will deliver a lecture on doing digital transformation challenges before the Indian languages. Without much delay, I request Professor Ghosh to start his lecture. And after the lecture, we will conduct a Q&A session. Okay, sir? You may start.
So much, Mr. Subrat. Um, I hope I'm clear and audible. The what we're going to look at is the challenge for the Indian languages in the digital field, and in order to understand future challenges, because we are not in the business of astrology, so we take our lessons from history. We try to understand trends of the future through the realities, through the understanding of the past, right? So when we think of the digital era that is unfolding, a lot of it is very new, and a lot of the developments are moving at a very fast pace over the last year or so. It's a major sort of public you know engagement in AI and machine learning systems, right? Artificial intelligence, um, which are able to perform certain tasks which otherwise were dependent on human skill, right? And that has brought about a major question of certain kinds of transformation in the world around us. And what I'm going to take us go through a little bit today is what is the history of the change of various kinds of media, because at the end of the day, um, a lot of our work, I mean, primary engagement between various humans, is the relationship between humans is takes place through communication, and communication tools are very central to the way the human society is organized, and and how we engage with each other, because the communication mechanisms are sort of around us. We take them as natural, as given. All right. Um and however, they are not natural. They are changeable. Uh, they are something that is a creation of of human agency, right? So if we can break the history of communication down to several periods, then broadly we can sort of locate it down to uh, three periods largely. That is that of the oral and the performative, and then you have the documentary, where you are either, so you're putting things on paper or some surface, right? Either through handwriting or through print. And now we are moving into an era of the digital, right? So, what I am going to argue is that there is a major transformation of society with the coming of the digital, and there were similar kind of transformations of society with when we moved from the oral and performative to the documentary era. I hope the whatever I'm saying is clear to you. If there is any doubt or question, please you can use the chat button to ask that question. All right. I don't get to see the chat button in my. Is the chat button active, Professor Subrat? Is there a there is
Yes,
a chat
yes.
button there. Okay. So what I am doing is I am going to keep the chat sort of open in my screen, so that you, if you have to ask, if anybody has any question, you can ask me straight away and not wait for the Q&A at the end. So that it's very important that we have you have clarity in whatever I am saying. All right. I hope you will follow that. Right. So, uh, so how do you define the oral and differentiate between the oral performative and the documentary? In the oral performative, principally, there is no script which is required, and all knowledge is primarily stored within the body. An exchange of information, exchange of ideas, exchange of knowledge between two individuals or group of individuals happens from one body to another body with the presence of that set of people, right? It cannot happen in absence. Now, with the documentary, we have a movement from or out of knowledge from the body outside of the body, right? Whatever I know, I can write down on a piece of paper. Before this, the knowledge would only be passed on from generation to generation or between peoples through oral means, all right, or performant means, gestures, even other kinds of things like how to cook something is something that you learn by doing, learn from somebody, by being with that somebody, right? You cannot learn from a recipe book, right? Now with the manuscript universe, it's possible that you learn certain skills even when the person who has written it is not there. So which means a knowledge can move across time without and outlive the person, and knowledge can also move geographically, right, without the person traveling. It is not that knowledge did not spread before the era of the manuscript, or the documentary world. It did spread, but it spread much slowly because travel wasn't that swift, and not a whole lot of travel happened, though cumulatively human beings traveled a lot of mass migration, etc. happened, but that happened over a period of hundreds of years and not in the period of weeks or months, as is the practice today, right? Because our means of transportation has increased enormously, right? So you understand that with the coming of the documentary, the nature spread of information, of knowledge, uh, changes. However, uh, beyond the manuscript, print actually increases this process exponentially. It just goes, becomes much swifter, because even when manuscript comes, yes, it is possible that if you have some idea, you have some knowledge, you know a story or a shlok or some knowledge, some knowledge about some ayurvedic medicine or something, it can be written down on palm leaf or whatever, and kept for posterity, or someone can carry that manuscript along to a remote location, a different location, and set up a monastery there or something and spread the knowledge there. But there were very few copies of each manuscript that were available. right? Uh, a manuscript would perhaps have maximum 2 or 3 copies across a certain continent, right? So there were very few copies of certain manuscripts which were available because they had to be making of manuscript is a very very laborious process. I believe that in your department you have archives which have manuscripts, and if you examine them closely, the manuscript making process is pretty elaborate, and each person had to laborious and had to undertake it uh, themselves. And literacy also was not a very very abundant commodity. There were very few people who were literate and could actually engage, have the kind of time that would be required to copy a manuscript by hand. So manuscripts were, though they did increase the availability of knowledge a great deal, they did not. They were not abundant. All right, they right, but it was with the coming of print that you could mechanize the process of reproducing written texts, and there could be many many copies, hundreds of copies distributed all across a very large area, and because of multiple reasons including the availability of print, literacy also went up. However, so there was a certain kind of change that happened in the society because of the change from all the way from the oral to the print. Now you do understand that though the print was discovered, was invented, is said to be invented in Mainz in what is currently Germany by a gentleman called Johannes Gutenberg in 1452, right? But though we credit Gutenberg with the invention of the printing press, uh, there was a long period of about 150 years or so where various people in Europe were trying to uh, figure out a way of mechanizing the copying of manuscripts. So, so keeping that in mind, we would say that Europe is the birthplace of print. But when print comes to places like India or other parts of South Asia, it it is not something that is organic. If we do not have time today to go into that, but if you read up on the history of printing technology, you'd find that the reason why various people were trying to invent printing was because there was a vast need of manuscripts, of texts. Copies were not being able to keep up with the demand for text because there was an increased in demand for learning and universities, etc., etc. So one would say that printing is something that grew organically from within Europe, and whereas when it came to the colonies, it was something that was supplanted, right? So when printing as a technology came to India, was brought to India by the Europeans, by the Portuguese and the French and the English, of course. Um, this print technology was not something that in there was a ground for in India, and it created, like many things in colonialism, it created a certain kind of distortion, and that is the kind of story that I'm going to talk about as a challenge that is there before India now. Now, let us understand the nature of print technology a little bit. So, if you have read Benedict Anderson and his work on print capitalism, you would know that one of the characteristics that Anderson points out, which is sort of the technological feature of print, is that print depends on particular typefaces, right? Typefaces which are mechanical, means which are put together to form a page, right? Now, given that the type, so if you're writing by hand, You can write, you can combine various kinds of letters, various ways. Each of us, our handwriting is slightly different. The language that we can want to write might change. When we are talking in our languages, we find that there is linguistic variation uh, between adjacent regions, right? I believe that even in Assam, the way the Ahomia language is spoken would vary a great deal between region to region, right? It is not the same Ahomia that is spoken, but the standard, the written Ahomia language is perhaps a lot more stable and is written in the same kind of linguistic structure throughout the state and even beyond, right? I hope I am correct on that. All right. So we find that in any particular language, we find a whole lot more variation in the spoken language, but but the written language is a lot more uniform and homogeneous. Why does that happen? Because uh, print requires a heavy capital input. The printing press and particularly preparation of those typesets and the laborious process through which the printed page is created. That is much before the coming of computers and offset press, etc. But the very characteristics of print were set for about 300 to 400 years, from 1452 till about the middle of the 20th century, right? So that's a period of about 500 years before we come to the offset press. It is the offset press that first time does away, I mean, not the first time, but really does away with the need for the typeface, right? Uh, if you want to check out about print history, that will help you understand this particular phenomena a whole lot more. Now, what you see on your screen is a typewriter, right? So typewriter also, we find that it has a certain keyboard. Now, and on the left hand side, you find a computer keyboard, right? The computer keyboard as it exists, if you're watching it through a computer, you will have that. Those of you who are using a mobile phone to listen to this particular lecture, I will come to you shortly, right? So we find that there is a QWERTY keyboard. This is called a QWERTY keyboard because you will find that written there, key WERTY is supposed to be the most efficient way of creating the keyboard, depending on our finger usages and the English language. Now, the QWERTY keyboard becomes ubiquitous. Ubiquitous means it is available everywhere, and every device has, every typewriter and every computer has a QWERTY keyboard. So that means it automatically prioritizes the Roman language, and particularly the English language. If you look at some European languages which also use the Roman alphabet, um, they do have certain kinds of accent marks which are not there in English, right? So English is the most advantaged language in that respect. So there was a fear that uh, that a print, due to its heavy technological input, mean in history meant, and this is what Anderson says, that it sort of irons out the differences between small regional differences between the way a particular language is spoken, and it creates a kind of homogeneous language scape and creates this model of the dominant language, right? So if we think of Bangla, Sylheti Bangla is very different from Bangla being spoken in Midnapur, and maybe it is very difficult for someone speaking the Midnapur tongue to converse with someone in Sylhet, but nominally they are both speaking Bangla, right? But when they write the same language. That is happening because of the fact that printing presses are centrally located within power centers, which sort of, and then those books are transported to various parts of that region, And this leads to a certain kind of uniformization of language. A linguistic unity is brought about. And that is what happens after coming of colonialism. In India, there are several print centers that are created, and because the typefaces and the printing presses sort of become kind of located at very important power centers, the languages of those power centers become the lingua franca of the entire region. And that ultimately leads to whatever kind of linguistic division of states that we see in the 1960s in this country. So we have about 22 scheduled languages, but India has a enormous number of languages, more than the 22 scheduled languages. All right. So that is what was created due to print, and with the QWERTY keyboard and the presence of the QWERTY keyboard on laptops and computers, uh, sort of created a threat that there would be a possibility of obliteration of various languages in favor of English, because the QWERTY keyboard became the only interface through which one could communicate in with the computer, with the help of the computer. So there was a this kind of situation. What was happening was that many Indian languages also were getting written in Roman alphabet, right? So there was a linguistic danger. But with the full scale coming of the digital, we find the nature of the keyboard undergoes a certain kind of change. So you have the touch screen through which you can import any particular keyboard and use it on your screen. So you are able to linguistically type out any particular language, right? So that so because the in the digital, it is possible to is that the keyboard becomes a virtual keyboard. It is no longer a physical keyboard, right? And if it is so the keyboard is mediated through a code, right? And as long as the code exists, and it can talk to your device, talk to your hardware device, you can install any particular language. So if support is available in Ohomia language, for example, you can import that onto your device and use the Ohomia language as you go. Is that fine? Right. So therefore the digital makes, as long as, so do understand, as long as the code exists somewhere on the internet or somewhere, you can import it. So the real task of of once again returning to a world of a linguistic diversity is uh, is dependent on the development of the code, right? If you go on to the linguistic settings of your device, or on Google or other such services, you would find that they're increasingly supporting more and more Indian languages. But my talk today is going to point out that the support that is being provided is limited, and more work needs to be done. And what are the possibilities of accentuating the linguistic diversity through the use of virtual tools in the Indian languages? All right. So let us, for a moment, focus on the condition of transformation. Now, the world today, as we see, is undergoing a digital transformation. That is, various practices that we had got used to undertaking through documentary means are now getting accomplished through digital means. So let us for a moment focus on the exchange of goods, the practice of exchange of goods. Now, we looked at the movement from the oral performative to the print and documentary to the digital. These are three epochs that we talked about, right? Uh, but it is not only in the sphere of communication that it impacts. It actually impacts everything that human beings do, every facet of life. um, so I take an example of exchange of goods. So before the documentary age, the way human beings would exchange goods would primarily be through a barter system, right? The exchange of goods are looked upon as a kind of barter and exchange between goods of similar values. A mediatory kind of role was played by the use of precious metals. So you had gold coins or other coins, which would sort of which should stand in for the value of a particular object. But the gold had to be of equal value, right? Gold or the silver. And to ensure that authority of the gold and silver, so there will be coining, so that there is a guarantee. So nobody actually has to go to a metallurgist to figure out whether the coins are pure gold or silver or not, because the stamp on the gold coin would say that this has the authority of this such and such emperor or whatever. And at the pain of punishment, nobody would try to counterfeit those coins, right? But yet the use of gold or silver, precious metals, is also a slight innovation on the barter system, right? You're still exchanging goods, and instead of exchanging good A with good B, you're using a precious metal C to mediate between the two. This system got changed with the coming of money. Now, what money is? Money, if you look at a particular currency note, you find that the money itself uh, is itself not of no value. The value of the money comes to the guarantee that is there on that note, which says that the bearer would be given a sum of whatever the value of the note is when the person presents it at the bank, right? That's a promissory note that you find on every banknote, right? Now that sum is an elusive. The value of the note is something that is elusive. It is only an exchange value that you have, but the piece of paper itself is of of of, of very little value. But it stands in for much greater value than itself. Typically, if you have 100 rupee note and it costs more 100 rupees to print that note, then that's not a monetary system, right? So typically, 100 rupee note should be much cheaper to make than 100 rupees itself. All right. So that is the way in which, and that is the way we have got used to um, exchanging goods in the documentary era, because it is only with the coming of print that makes, or the documentary world, that makes this kind of banknotes possible. Now in the digital, we have all got now used to use of digital money, right? Electronic money through the UPI systems, QR codes, and various payment platforms, etc. And that is a kind of transformation that we have gone through over the period of the last 5 or 6 years, right, in this country, more than many other parts of the world. So this process of digital transformation of our universe is currently taking place. So what are the implications of it? Now, we find that, uh, as I had promised, that my talk today is going to hinge on looking back at history, at lessons from the past, and trying to gaze into the future and see what are the implications of the digital, and then how we can seize those opportunities. So, when the Europeans came to this country, to this part of the world, and indeed to other parts of the world, um, one of the things that they figured out is that if they wanted to have a greater control over the resources of the subcontinent, they needed to know the subcontinent well. And remember, the Europeans were coming from a documentary universe, and they were coming into a largely oral and performative universe. The Indian subcontinent, or South Asia, was still a space where there was primarily um, communication happened through oral means. Literacy was very low, right? It's not that literacy at Europe was also very high at that point, but it was substantially higher. And at least the administrative mechanisms in Europe were a lot more documentary than than in India, all right, than in South Asia. So the Europeans, when they came, they used documentary means. They set up these various surveys and tried to make detailed notes of the kind of flora, fauna, the geographical features. They set up the anthropological survey of India, the archaeological survey of India. They carried out extensive surveys, all right, because they wanted to know the land very well. And what happened was that when they were trying to, one of the things that really was key to the European sort of plunder of South Asia was taxation. And in order to be able to tax land and collect revenues from the land, the Europeans had to gauge a sense of who owns the land, or who is going to be the taxpayer. And so it laid out as very laid out certain rules for land ownership, and they tried to figure out who the owner of a particular piece of land is. And in order to do that, they depended on documentary records. And in most Indian cases, these kind of documentary records did not exist, because these were mostly customary, right? People and families had customary control over land. In many cases, land wasn't a private property. uh, Land would be community property in many cases, or sort of traditional properties. Other than, and there would be also cases where there would be large joint families which would be in the ownership of land. But these did not make sense to European administrators who are coming out of a documentary universe, and they sought to have look for individual ownership of land. And this created a major disruption in the way our world was organized. You know, if you think of some of the performance forms in Kerala, for example, the the Tayyam performance forms in Kerala were something that was sustained by these large Tarawads, or the traditional families, and their ownership of land. But when and these Tarawad were matrilineal, right? And when the Europeans came in, they found that that they tried to figure out who the individual who owns the land. As a result, this matrilineal system broke down. You had a more nuclear family system coming into place, because otherwise they would lose control of the land. And because the Tarawad broke down, there was no support system to be able to support the Tayyam dance form. As a result, there was a decline of the Tayyam dance form. All right. So there were many implications of this abrupt and sudden bringing in of documentary guidelines of administration into South Asia, where South Asia was not prepared for it. And it is not a negative thing. South Asia need not have been prepared for it, because I don't see that colonialism under any circumstance was justified, right? So South Asia would probably have done a very good job at its movement to other forms of knowledge sharing had it been left on its own. But that is contrafactual. That's not how history happened. Colonialism was a reality, and let us look at the experiences of it. Now, one of the larger implications of this kind of documentary change, we found that, and if you read Professor Alok Rai's work on Hindi nationalism, you find that he talks about how the the Fort William College in Calcutta sort of made a little uh, sort of change in the way textbooks were printed. And for the Hindustani language, you understand, Hindustani was a language spoken by a lot of people in North India, and the British had their eyes on North India. And when they printed textbooks for the Hindustani audience, the children there, instead of uh, instead of earlier Hindustani would be basically written in whichever script, whether it is written in the Nagari script or the Nastaliq or the Persian script. It was interchangeable. There was no clear idea of break on the basis of religion. All right. But what happened at Fort William College is they decided that for the Muslim classrooms, for Muslim schools, they would send textbooks which were written in the Persian script. And for Hindu schools, they would send textbooks which were written in the Nagari script, right? Now, if you hear the history of the Urdu or Hindustani or Hindi, then you would know that the language is by and large same. So, if today you would say that Urdu is the national language of Pakistan, uh, but when let's say Pakistani cricket players or others speak, uh, those of us who know a bit of Hindi would understand them perfectly, because by and large at the base of it the languages are it's the same language. It's writing Bangla in Roman script. The script can be interchangeable. I can write Bangla using the Ohomia script as well, to a large extent, barring a few words here and there. It would be possible, right? So the script was interchangeability, but because print is a fixed form, that is something we figured out a few slides ago. The Fort William College created a demarcation between Hindus and Muslims and language. So now two languages are created from Hindustani. Hindustani written in the Persian script was called Urdu, and it became for the Muslims. Hindustani written in the Nagari script was called Hindi, and it was meant for the Hindus. As a result, now the two schooling systems sort of separated out, and that created a division between these two populations, which ultimately resulted in the partition of the country. That's a larger history which we are aware of. And it seems that the partition is not complete yet, right? There is still a lot of tension within the subcontinent on this kind of religious lines, and which falsely appears as linguistic difference. It's actually it's an engineered difference, and the implications of this kind of forcible usage of some documentary intervention in South Asia by the colonizers is very, very serious. Okay, I'll script the next few slides, and I'll go to this. Now, when we are talking about this kind of digital transformation, we are talking about a possibility. We realize that you have to scan the manuscripts, and uh, that's one level. To be able to have digital scans, you can store it on a CD, on a hard drive. You can also put it on a website, and you can access it. But if you wanted to do deep search, if you wanted to actually get the machine to read the text, then you needed some other mechanisms like the optical character reader should be able to produce digitized text. The machine is not able to read the text in the image. First, the image has to recognize the characters which are there, right? And then you create a corpus, right? Now this is a process of transformation which is extremely laborious and extremely expensive, so if you have undertaken some amount of digitization exercise in your university, you would know that it is a very, very labor and capital intensive process. But once undertaken, but so that's producing the images itself. So where there are lots and lots of records in Indian languages which are yet to be scanned, but whatever has been scanned are existing only in form of primarily in the form of images, and machines still can't read them other than accessing them through metadata. Now, however, if you are able to transform that into machine readable text, you find that you can do a whole lot more interesting things, right? And that is when we think of the digital humanities, we talk about the kind of linguistic analysis, the computational analysis, counting word frequencies, looking at relationships between the words, creating network clouds, and also to be able to train language models in through artificial intelligence, things like chat gpt and other. So they then can, in order to train them, you need to have machine readable text, right? So the need for creating large corpora in Indian languages becomes very, very important, and that is one of the kind of assistance that we got from your department, where we were able to get hold of a lot of image scans, and then we actually appointed annotators who annotated this. So it's actually physically typed out. It's only after that that we put it through the machine learning algorithm, through these neural networks, and be able to create a model where now the machine is able to type out, so to say, the text in the image by itself. All right. Now, and all these machine learning models are dependent on language models that are created through machine readable texts. Unfortunately, the kind of effort that we have put in for few languages like Urdu and for Assamese here at IIT Delhi are rare. There are very few the availability of properly trained historic corpora of in Indian languages is something that is difficult to get. We don't get large corpus. That kind of work hasn't happened. All right. And the point that I want to turn toward is that here is a picture of India's linguistic diversity. There are a whole many languages, which many there are these various languages which are otherwise sort of clubbed together as one language, but there are small variations of of a large language system also. So there are many languages in India, but India has and we can see the linguistic map of India. This is the 1951. India had a certain map, and after the linguistic reorganization, India's map sort of changed, right? And language sort of has become a very important sticking point in Indian politics. This linguistic division was at the back of some language agitations, and even today we find a lot of resistance. There's also a sort of administrative desire to sort of impose a sort of one single language model on the country, right? And we also find that because there is a resistance towards the imposing of an Indian language as a national language, the elite sort of make do with continued usage of English. So I just wanted to sort of point out that what the opportunities on the digital are are vast, and we should not be making the kind of mistakes or uh, which happened with colonialism. Of course, under colonialism, uh, we Indians did not have the power, but notionally we have the power today, and we should not be making the mistakes of the colonial past, because uh, the idea is that in the absence of proper training of linguistic models in this country, it is likely that we will be borrowing foreign models, right? We would be borrowing foreign models, and they will create same kind of distortions that print caused on India. We have just figured out that the partition of this continent, print played a very important role, and this division brought about by print between Hindi and Urdu was absolutely principally sort of behind the the creation of the kind of massacres in the South Asia, which we continue to witness even today. Many of the models that are getting used in the digital transformation process are models which are trained on Western data. Okay, because of the difficulty that there is an absence of training data sets in Indian languages. And one last point that I want to point out is that whatever effort that is happening in India to develop OCR engines and other kinds of things, in most cases, they are developing through the initiative of technocrats, right? Through led primarily through engineers, right? Or through engineering departments, with very little input from people who are knowledgeable in these languages, the heritages of these languages. And that is a worrying point, because in such a situation, then that it can lead to certain, because code is not value neutral. Code actually is based on certain assumptions of the coder. If you look at texts which deal with critical code studies, they will tell you how code can create distortions. Code is not value neutral. So, but the reason why this kind of lopsided development of technology happens is because there is no participation of people from the humanities, from the social sciences, in the development of these technologies. Their inputs are not taken. And behind this is probably the inability of humanists to engage in these conversations. Now, if you look at your syllabi, I mean, maybe not your syllabi, but syllabi in general in the humanities and social sciences in this country, and indeed in many other places in the world, humanities social sciences curricula do not have any scope for any study of technology at all. Very few graduates in language programs, literature programs, or even political science or history programs learn any technology. They don't know how to write a single simple code, and it's not very difficult if you just have the proper setup. And because you do not understand technology, or we do not understand technology, we are unable to engage in any conversation or point out any critical point to the kind of technology that is developing. So it is important that pedagogically we make a transformation in our curriculum. Uh, Humanities and social science curriculum need to include some basic training in technology. And the second point that I want to emphasize is that there's a great need for the development of linguistic models uh, emphasize on the creation of corpora, annotated corpora in the Indian languages, in which departments such as yours have a major role to play. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your thought-provoking lecture. Now I want to conduct the Q&A session. Now I request the participants to participate in the Q&A session. Any question, any comment from the participant? Yeah. Yes. We are waiting for the response from the participants.
So, Professor Subra,
Yes, yes, sir.
if students are unable to ask questions even now, if you can compile questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them over email or whatever, also at a later stage. I mean, I understand that sometimes it might
Yes,
take
language.
time to process, because many of the things that I have spoken about may not be things that may be new
Okay.
and might take some time to process them. So if there are questions now, I'm happy to sort of engage with them. But even later, everyone can either you can compile questions together and send it to me, or people can directly write to me.
Okay, so it's a good suggestion. I will do it. Anyway, any question from any participants? Okay. So one question. Participants. Okay. Participants may also use the email ID. Sir also mentioned in the set box. originboost@sss.iitd@ac.in. So there is one question. Our
Yes.
student Debasish will ask. Debasish, you may proceed.
Okay. He has put the question in the
Yeah.
chat, but maybe he can speak.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So
Sir,
you're yeah. Go ahead.
you may address that question, sir.
Yeah. I today's lecture I did not deal with specific tools. But if you really want, I don't know if you are aware of Voyant. I just try to share my screen and show it to you once. So one of the tools that you can straight away use is Voyant, right?
Okay, sir.
Now, uh, in Voyant, they have to show your the capabilities of Voyant. They have a kind of a uh, corpus which is already ready there, and when you open it, it can engage in some analysis. It gives you some data regarding the text. Because I did not deal with this at the moment, so I really cannot take you through this particular tool, but there are lots of tutorials which are available on YouTube, and you can go through it. And then if you wish to, you see, once you've got a hang of how to use Voyant, you see, you can upload your own corpus. You can use the upload button to upload your own corpus, or you can paste text into this. Professor Subrat, can you suggest to me a certain website from which I can find some Assamese data?
Yeah, now, sir, right
You
now,
try it on the screen directly. Yeah, any website?
SMS text.
Huh.
Sir, there is SMS Wikipedia. There is SMS
Okay,
Wikipedia. SMS Wikipedia.
right. So let us go to Assamese language. Right, right. Great. So here we get some articles. So let me. I will not be able to read them very well, but let me see. So if I just take this text, right, and I copy it, then I paste it here. It works with the Assamese text itself also,
Okay.
right? Only problem is that you have to remove the stop words. The stop words are not automatically there. It recognizes stop words. Stop word means the ordinary words like articles and, but, etc., which are very often used in a particular language. You might have to create a manual list of Assamese stop words, which if you search on the internet, you will get a list of Assamese stop words, right? And if you input that into this box here, you can say, you can create your own set of edited stop word lists. If you add that, then you can use this tool Voyant. And you can already see that there are a few words which are already there, like Kobe. I can understand that, right? So yeah, so there some of the tools can already be used, and not all of them are linguistic tools. Actually, there are other kinds of tools. I didn't talk about tools today. I was talking about the larger frame, but yes, can be used. But for that, you need machine readable language text. So if you have a particular scanned document, that will not do. If you want to take an Assamese novel published in 1950 or so, which is not available as machine readable text, you won't be able to do that analysis unless you have OCR. And that is what we are trying to develop. All right.
Any other question?
Thank you, sir.
Debasish is there, sir.
I
Sir,
hope
due to
you.
poor network connectivity, I posted my question in written.
That's fine. That's fine. So you can search for Voyant tools and try and use it for some Assamese corpora. Please look for some kind of tutorials on YouTube for Assamese for tutorials on Voyant, and you should be able to start using them.
Sure, sir. It will be great help.
I have seen that Professor Utpal sir is with us. Sir, are you available?
Dr. Neog.
Sir,
Yeah,
is there any?
I
Is there
joined at the very beginning, but I could not attend to the talk entirely because there were other visitors to my room.
Okay, sir,
But
okay.
the portion that I could attend to, yeah, it was very interesting. And the actual difficulties with Indian languages, many of those points have been very nicely brought out. Okay, so like standardization and things like that, yeah, availability of data. So these I definitely agree, and we need to do a lot of groundwork here. More than that, I cannot comment much on this, but it was a very useful talk, and I congratulate Professor Ghosh for interacting with our group here. Okay, thanks.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your comment.
Thank
And at last, I convey my heartfelt thanks to Professor Arjun Ghosh, sir, for your time and for your wonderful lecture. And I hope in future we will uh, get more response from your end in our DS journey, sir. With this note, I conclude our session. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all participants. Thank you all participants. Thank you.